Well, that brings us to our next guy, Jameson Williams, who was an Ohio State Buckeye, but he didn't end his career there. He's originally from St. Louis, another track and field star. No surprise, although this one, I should mention, holds the state record for the 300-meter hurdles, which was a record previously set by Buckeye great Ezekiel Elliott.
That's right.
Williams was like, oh, there's this Wilson kid and this Olave kid, and they're both really, really good. So you know what? I would like to stand out. Ended up entering the transfer portal, going to Alabama, which, by the way, was one of the schools that recruited him out of high school in the first place. And, without Jalen Waddle or Devonta Smith on the roster, he had an opening and he took advantage of his opportunity. I would say the hallmark of his game is his speed. He also has incredible footwork. But what, when you saw him, first came to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, explosiveness. It was stunning to see him evolve so quickly. I mean, because at Ohio State, probably because of a numbers game too, and maybe some immaturity, or he was sort of dinged a little bit character-wise at Ohio State. Left that situation, goes to Alabama and explodes. I mean, went from 15 catches in 2 years to, averaging 20 yards a catch and 15 scores this year. He was the guy. So, to see him really kind of break out of his shell and do so with that explosive speed. I mean, he comes from a track family. I mean, that's really what the Williams name has been known for. And he's translated to the football field. He's slender. He's got the ACL injury that we have to worry about. But assuming, as most ACL patients do, he returns to full health, in time, you could have probably the best vertical route, or maybe 1A to Olave in this entire class.
6'2", 179 pounds. So wiry on the leaner side. Any idea if there is room for him to pack on muscle?
Yeah.
And if you think it would affect his speed, which unfortunately, as you mentioned, we don't have a time on because of the January ACL tear.
Yeah, I think he's a 4.3 guy all day. I mean, but yeah, the weight concern. I mean, people ask that about Devonta Smith too, right? Oh, you're only 160 pounds, right? Can we throw a couple of porterhouses on you and see what happens? But he was able to make it work last year at a lower weight. There are some guys who are just a little bit different. We'll see if he qualifies to be in that discussion.
Williams isn't a Heisman winner, though.
That's true. No, I know, right? And I mean, and he's already got a full season under his belt, so. I mean, I hesitate to portend greatness on him right away, but I do think if he gets back the same kind of explosive vertical speed that he did, and really sharp route running too, in terms of the top of his stem, you see him make a 45-degree cut on a dime. That makes you believe that this is a pretty exceptional athlete who has allowed the receiving portion of his game catch up a little bit.
Who are you comping him to?
Yeah,
this one I thought was interesting. It's not a 1-for-1 for me.
Yeah, no, it's a tough call because I mean, obviously you start with the body size. There aren't, too many 175, 180 pound receivers who are that tall who have thrived in the league, and Robbie Anderson's certainly one of them. You got to mention him, I think. But the one in terms of just his game and the way he can pull away from people and almost shock people with his speed reminded me of Brandon Cooks too.
Sure.
Cooks early in his career, I think people saw him and he sort of had this, kind of weird, small, stockier build a little bit, but, he had ability to turn on that extra gear a little bit. So I think in terms of how he'll be used, that's probably about the best I could come up with.
I actually, when I did a Twitter poll, I included Cooks, Anderson, and Will Fuller.
Yep.
In the poll. Will Fuller won out. I had Robbie Anderson. I just imagine all of these long touchdown bombs to Williams. And again, I'm thinking in a fantasy point of view, right? So that I can see it happening more and more, knowing where his value would show up on not just a stat sheet for NFL fans, but for my own roster.
But you're not as high on him, though. You're not as wild on him as some of these other guys.
I also wasn't as high on Will Fuller. I'm a little bit concerned about the injury. I feel like I don't want to call him a one-trick pony, but I do feel like there are other players. Look, he's in my top 7.
Sure. Right.
I just think there are other players with more dimension to their game, and being a skinny deep threat is great, but you have to have the pieces around it in a landing spot in order for that to work.
Absolutely.
And yet, when you have a guy like Olave who can run crisp routes, like he's going to find success somewhere. When you have Garrett Wilson, who is so pro ready, he's going to have immediate success. So Williams to me is like, there's a potential there, but I just don't see him blowing up immediately unless he were to go to a place like Kansas City.
I mean, boy, you think about the possibility of him slipping to a big play offense. And, the ACL injury is going to knock him down. I don't know how far. Remember Todd Gurley went 15th a few years, back when he came out of the draft. That was a surprise. So there's always the potential of him going ahead of, one of these other receivers we've mentioned. But if he does slide a little bit and he gets in the range of the Chiefs or the Packers or my pick, the Chargers, who are at 17, I love the Chargers receivers, but they can be patient
Josh
with
Palmer.
him. I do too. I just think he's going to be your vertical guy. And, Keenan Allen makes a lot of money, and maybe in a year or two, or Mike Williams, certainly injury prone guy. He fills a void that they don't currently have, which is that vertical threat, I think. He's not going to be ready for the start of camp, but he'll be ready at some point this season. And maybe year one is going to be a little disappointing fantasy wise, but depending on where he lands, he could be a jackrabbit. I think it's be a lot of fun.
I think that's a perfect way to point to. I think that's the perfect way to finish off that segment, is that he's not going to be fire for fantasy year one, but put a pin in it, remember his name, and we'll see how he matriculates. All right. We're going to do a quick lightning round because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, this class is super, super deep. So and as you said, there's going to be a run on this position, even in the first round. So a lot of these names we can't go deep on, but we wanted to mention those top 5 guys. And now let's do kind of a quick summation of the next 3 players. I want to start with Jahan Dotson, because he is probably my favorite player overall in the draft. I really, really like his game. I don't have him ranked number 1. I have him a little bit lower than that, but I think overall he is the one I'm rooting for the most. I am normally someone who likes a bigger bodied wide receiver, and yet at 5'11" and 181 pounds, he has won my heart. He's 22 years old, born in Jersey, but went to high school in Pennsylvania, has had love for Pennsylvania ever since. I think I always mention this because it's so interesting to me how some kids are like, no, this is where I live. Like, I'm a star here. I'm going to be a star at the local-ish college, and that's the way it's going to be. And Dotson went to Penn State. He was Penn State's leading receiver within, the second or third year he arrived on campus, and he closed out his college career, one of just 10 Nittany Lions to clear 2,000 career receiving yards. The reason I like him the most, this is I'm going to say it now, I'm going to plant my flag. He has the best hands in the entire class. 2 drops on 138 targets as a senior. I love a player who is mistake-free. He reminds me a lot in that respect of Emmanuel Sanders. I think he can be plug-and-play ready. He's not going to go any place where he's going to be asked to be the number 1. That won't work for him, but can he be Tyler Lockett? I think so. Yeah,
and I love Lockett. Lockett's one of my favorite wide receivers in the entire league, and that's a great comp. And boy, and the thing with Dotson that makes you so encouraged, in addition to the hands, I mean, first of all, as a sophomore, he was criticized for his hands. He had a couple of big drops, and I heard he spent time just drilling and working and making sure that was not going to be a weak part of his game. Oftentimes, these small receivers, smaller hands, you see some drops that you shouldn't. By the end of his career, he was probably, like you said, the most reliable volume target, and they got the ball to him in a lot of ways. I listed Hollywood Brown. Now, Brown is obviously known for being a little bit inconsistent, a guy who can drop a pass every now and then, but just in terms of that explosive speed, I think it's there before and after the catch. You can move him inside and out. I think he's probably best as a slot receiver, and he could do some real damage underneath. And then all of a sudden you pop him over the top and make some big plays. Like, there's really no better year 1 to year 4 progression than Jahan Dotson in this class. Every single year, he just kept adding tools to his box and getting better.
I think for a fantasy comp, I imagine Elijah Moore type of ascent. He's not someone you're going to want to draft, but he has the pro readiness that if you get him into a system and a couple of guys get hurt, he's going to have that 4, 5, 6 week run where he is absolutely on fire and one of the hottest waiver wire picks in the like second half of the season.
I agree. I like that. Yep.